Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Marvel Plus, the podcast devoted to all things MCU. And we're back once again to discuss an episode of What If, the seventh day in a row, 1 week solid of doing Marvel Plus. And I'm happy to have one of my favorite guests back. Maggie Standish is back because she reached out first thing this morning. Hey, I love this episode. So I'm like, you should be the guest then. So welcome back.
And I watched it on time because, other than the first episode, I have not watched any of them on time since.
Really?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
It's not because
Like,
I didn't want to, but I just kept forgetting that it was daily. So
oh,
yesterday
yeah.
I watched 5 and 6, and today I'm like, no, I'm going to get up and watch it right away before I forget again. And I was so happy I did.
How good was 5? The Captain Carter episode?
Yeah, I liked that one. I
I
really
loved it.
That was that the first one and today's have been my favorite episodes.
Yeah. Today was definitely every single one of them surprises me. Like I said, I didn't know if I was gonna care about this one, but it's like once you get into it and you realize it's like this character story and it's a personal story about Hela and like how she views the world, and it's I don't know, it went pretty deep for a 30-minute what if episode.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, it left me wanting more from this particular what if. Like, I would love another like 2 or 3 episodes based on this. And I'm like, that tells me that I really enjoyed the episode and really enjoyed the story it was telling.
Yeah, that's what the best of them do, and I think that's why like the Captain Carter ones keep getting more episodes because they keep blowing people away. Like people are like, we love this character.
Exactly. And I loved, for the Captain Carter one, I really appreciated how they kind of changed up Steve and Bucky and like even that main Hydra character. I can never remember his name from Winter Soldier, but the one who ends up being a Hydra person.
Yeah.
But like I need more Captain Carter, and I loved her with I loved the opposite they did where she shows up and the Black Wit Natasha's the one who's running.
Yeah.
Like
yes,
that's
and
such a good callback to the movie.
Yeah, and I loved them as a pair. Like just teaming them up was awesome because they're both essentially just humans. And so it's kind of like how when you team up Black Widow with Hawkeye, like it's always great, but then two female characters that are basically, Captain Carter's enhanced, obviously, but they're both still just human beings. Like they can be killed, they can be hurt. So, and they literally just have to fight with their hands and or weapons, right?
Exactly.
So, it was one of my favorites. But no, this episode surprised me. Even like starting out, I wasn't super into it when it first started out and Asgard and everything. And it's like, I'm like, okay. I don't know. I wasn't super into it until I realized kind of what they were doing. And it seems like they basically swapped Thor and Hela in this, in the sense that instead of him casting her down to hell, he cast her down to Midgard, much like he did with Thor.
Yeah.
And then when she arrives there, she's unworthy of her crown, just like Thor was with Mjolnir. So it's very similar. They even brought in like the rain and the mud and stuff, like from the scene when Thor tries to pull his hammer up and can't do it. Like that was all straight from the first Thor film.
Yeah, and I really love that callback, especially because I know not everyone loved the first Thor movie, but I very much appreciated it. And so it's nice to see those little callbacks.
Yeah, I will tell you, there's 2 worse Thor movies than that Thor movie.
There are.
Yeah.
I do not like Dark World.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. It wasn't, the first Thor wasn't bad. Like, and especially early on when that was one of the first few MCU films, it's like, this is great at the time. And now it's just like, it was pretty good, good introduction to a character. I thought they did pretty well.
Sure.
Now, I always, since Ragnarok, I really enjoyed Hela as an antagonist, but like this episode proved to me that she's a pretty awesome protagonist as well. Like she's the one that we're following in this story and kind of rooting for by the end. And I dig that, and not like a anti-hero really, and not really like, you just empathize with her, but like you kind of start like she takes a turn, and then you're kind of on her side by the end.
Yeah. And I thought this episode did a really good job of showing, in some ways, nature versus nurture. Like, part of
Yeah,
Hela's like personality is because of how she was raised and all the expectations placed upon her. And if
yeah,
you're raising someone to kill and be a general and take over the world, you can't really fault them when suddenly that becomes their entire personality.
yeah. I like if you in today's world, right? Like if you raise your kids around, I don't know, racism and racist language and things, like how are you
Yeah,
going to expect them to grow up and see different races as anything different than other, right? Like how you can't, I
exactly.
mean, that's 100% taught, right? And
Yes.
in Hella's story, it's like even more detrimental because he has taught her to be a killer, and he's
Yeah.
basically taken the innocent child out of her and created something. And then yeah, like she has a great point, like you can't create me to do this thing that I didn't even really want to do, but you forced me into this life, and then you discard me when you don't want that life anymore. Like that's terrible.
Yeah, and I thought a perfect analogy was when she had her flashback with that creature and she's like, "Why are they
Yeah,
missing it?" And I'm like, that is exactly what Odin did to Hela. Like,
yeah,
it is.
yeah, yeah. It was a perfect like analogy that they put in there, and kind of her first introduction to that way of thinking. Like, oh, you have to make it yours, and then you have to control it so it fights for you. You know, um, yeah, man. I think without that scene, the flashback to her childhood, I wouldn't have cared as much about her story.
Yeah.
But that one tiny little flash, it's not like they kept going back and flashing back a lot. They just did that one scene, and it totally got me. It was like, okay, she wasn't this way. She was just a kid, and she
Yeah.
became this, you know. And Odin is a son of a bitch, man. He is the
Oh,
worst. Like I'm starting to I'm starting to think back through, and like even through all the films, is like he wasn't very good dude.
no, like, I think my favorite moment with Odin is when he's dying and he's like, "My sons," and you're like, that is the one moment where Loki feels accepted by his father, and you're like, this is the
Right.
perfect family moment. Why the hell couldn't you have more of these? I'm very confused.
Yeah.
But speaking of the flashback, I really enjoyed where they placed it, because I think if they'd placed it any earlier, it wouldn't have had the impact that it did.
Yeah, I agree because you still need to view her in kind of a negative light throughout the first half of the episode. They
Yeah.
dropped it right there, like midway through. They placed it at a perfect spot in the episode to kind of switch your mind into it. Like you're in a different mindset now, a different view of Hela. And yeah, I like I said, I didn't care, but even the first half of the episode, I didn't care that much because she was still villainous. I'm like, how are they going to play this out? Like, you got basically two villains because Wenwu also is a villain in a sense. And then it also kind of confused me because he always had this goal, like most villains do, of like, oh, I'm gonna take care of the whole world, I'll protect them, but in a sense it's controlling them, right? Like
Yeah.
forcing them into. And this season's done that other times too, because that even the last episode with Kahori, it was
Yeah.
kind of weird. It was like at the end, um, she was gonna. I know she was spreading like a good way of life, but at the same time, she was choosing for the whole world what path they were gonna go on, and that kind of like seems to resonate throughout these other episodes too. Because like Hela then ends up doing that at the end of this as well. That's also when Wu's story is like that's what he wants. But I don't know. I guess with the turn that she takes in the episode, you feel better about it. You know, um, she's like the goddess of light now. I don't know exactly what, goddess of life, maybe like the opposite of death. But that was pretty cool when she switches and becomes, has the all white outfit. But yeah, what about the inclusion of like the 10 rings, and because that was the title of the episode, which
Yeah, it was.
was not quite, um it was a little deceptive. It was a little
Yeah.
deceptive. It made you think that she was going to find and use the 10 rings, and I thought that throughout the episode. I'm like, oh, she's going to take them from Wenwu's. What's going to have something at some point? She's going to win them from him or something. But no, she just encounters them.
Yeah, and I think I understand why they used the title they did, because it's all ties back to that movie.
Mhm.
But you're right, it is deceptive, because it should have been less, since the episode was less about the rings and more about the world. I feel
Yeah.
like that should have been incorporated. But again, I mean, the titles have not necessarily told you a lot about the episodes, so the
No.
titles didn't bother me as much. Going back to what you said about the first half of the episode, I watched it twice. Like, I watched it this
Mhm.
morning, and then I watched it again. Actually, I just finished before you texted me. And watching it a second time, I had a better appreciation for her as a villain in the earlier part of the episode, but I
Yeah.
didn't the first time I watched it.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, and like I said, I loved her as a villain going in,
Yeah.
but the start of the episode, I'm thinking like, do I want another villain-led story? Like Sony does this a lot, clearly with
Yeah.
their films. Like, try to make the villain, you root for the villain.
Yeah.
I don't know,
And
but I like that she took a turn, rather than, and with the teachings from, what's the city called that she goes to, the magic realm, from Ten Rings, where she goes to train.
I can't remember. I've only watched Ten Rings once, and I really wish I'd watched it before I watched this episode, because I
Yeah.
forgot a lot of what happened in that movie.
Yeah, well, essentially, she becomes untrained from her
Yes.
other ways,
Yes.
and has a different mindset after coming
Yes.
out of there. I do find it interesting, though, that they basically had two villains take a positive turn in this, because Wenwu was, his goal, as he said, was like for world peace. Hers was for, what, interstellar peace? I don't know, like everything, the entire nine realms, and beyond. But I found it interesting. I thought that the showdown with Odin at the end was phenomenal. Like,
Yes.
that was the whole fight was awesome.
Yes, I really enjoyed it. I was glad it was the length it was. I
Mm,
wouldn't have minded if it was like another 30 seconds, but it didn't need to be 30 seconds. But I
yeah,
really liked Odin's reaction to it and what he says to her. And she's like, no. Like, she's like, I'm going
yeah,
to do this, but I'm going to do this so I can undo all of the bad that you've done. And
yeah,
it was such a pivotal moment, because it's like, sorry, Dad, but I'm not like you. So
yeah,
bye.
yeah. You're a dick, because he really is. Like, I
Yeah,
think,
he is.
going back, just when he kind of, Odin's this guy who like says all these like terrible things, but then like when someone else has the upper hand, he's got to like, I mean, basically he was like, "Oh no, it's because of, I've raised you to be this, and you are the best." Like, I sent you down here to learn something. Like, bullshit! You did not. You did not
No.
send her down here so that she could come back and rule Asgard. He was full of shit on that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um,
If he wants to
but I
try to make
just,
himself feel better, he can, but
yeah,
that doesn't make it any more the truth.
yeah. I thought, I was just like, look at this creep, dude. Like, come on. Like, even still trying to take credit for like her complete turnaround from his way of thinking. Um, that's ridiculous. But it's like, yeah, it made me think like, what a punk, dude. Like,
Yep.
Odin was, I don't know. I guess I never saw it. But if you look back in the other films, there is some really like not great things that Odin does, not just to Loki, but even his favored son he casts down to Midgard when he doesn't do things right. Like, and in that sense, remember, he kind of takes credit for what happens to Thor. Like, oh, I
Yep.
sent you down there to learn a lesson. Like, did you though, or were you just pissed off and you cast him down there with the regular people, and have with no power? Like, it was a punishment. It was
It
not a
was,
consequence. It wasn't to send him on some vision quest. Like, you were casting him out because you were tired of it.
yeah. I feel like it's one of those things he believes it and therefore it must be true, but the rest of us are see right through it.
Yeah, I don't even think he believes it. I really don't think he believes it. I think it's like it's a form of control. It's like, oh well, I foresee all. I made this happen. You're who you are because of me. It's like, man, Odin's kind of the worst.
Yep.
I really
Yeah,
think
he
so.
is.
But yeah, I found it an interesting idea to tie in 10 Rings and that whole world that we encountered in Shang-Chi, and
Yeah.
then the Norse gods world of Thor and Loki and Odin and Hela. That was an interesting choice, and I don't know, it makes me appreciate the people that come up with this stuff. Like,
Oh, for
I
sure.
would I would never think to combine these two worlds. Like, obviously they're connected in the sense that they're in the MCU, but we've never seen, or probably would never have a reason to see Hela meet Wenwu. Like,
Yeah.
so just coming up with that concept, it's like, I don't know, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Just, I mean, a lot of these episodes are like that. I'm like, man, like, they never do the what ifs that you would imagine they would do. Like, something very cliche, like what if Thanos won?
Yeah.
Or something like that. They never do the cliche thing. It's always this like random, tiny moment, tiny change that affects everything, and it's always the most obscure thing. You never expect it to be that thing.
But I think that's partly why What If is such an enjoyable series, at least for me, is because they don't do the cliche things and they come up with interesting concepts like this one or T'Challa as Star Lord in the first season. Like
Yeah.
those kinds of things just really make make me want to keep watching this show.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. Yeah, and then I was so happy with yesterday's episode when they just decided, like, we'll introduce a brand new character that isn't even from the comics. They just made up a brand new character. It's like, oh, okay, this is fun. Get creative, guys. Like,
yeah,
this is what the comic books have been doing forever. This is how you got all these characters. Like, some of you can make up some new characters too. We're like, a lot of people, most people are into the MCU. They're not reading the comics. Do what you want. This is their world, right?
yeah,
Yeah, this is the world for the people who love the films. So
yeah,
go ahead, introduce new characters, kill characters off, do things differently from the comic books sometimes. I like when they interpret storylines from the comics. That's great. It's just like getting an interpretation from a novel to a film. It's fun to see. But you guys, it's your world. You created it. You can have fun with it. You can take it in any direction you want. There's no exact script for it. Like, so yeah, why wouldn't they introduce? I'm surprised this is the first time they've really introduced a brand new hero like that.
yeah. And that was the thing is I when I saw the title and I saw the character, I was like, am I totally blanking? Like, am I just like
Same.
forgetting? And I went and looked it up and I'm like, oh no, no, this is a new character. And
Yep.
so I really enjoyed it. And while I don't necessarily think she should have her viewpoint all over the world, when juxtapositioned against who I assume was supposed to be Queen Isabella, I was like, no, no.
Right.
I mean, she wants to rule the world, and you are the lesser of two evils. And you seem
Yeah.
like a good person. I just don't think you should be doing this necessarily for everyone. But hey, if it works for
Yeah.
you,
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I hope we get to see that character at some point
me
in
too.
live action. That would be
Yeah,
great. The character, the actress that voices her, actually kind of looks very similar to the character. Like, I'm like, Yeah, just bring her in. I mean, she's an actor, right? Like
Yeah,
she's doing the voice. I say bring her into a live action, like even if it's just in one of these big team things, like a Secret Wars movie where you have all these characters coming from different universes. I want to see her in live action. I think it would be awesome.
me too.
Yeah,
I and I was glad that they got Kate Blanchett back as Hela.
yeah. It's always great when they can do that. Like,
Yeah.
and I feel like the only ones we haven't really got are like the uh RDJ and let's see who else. Chris. Um,
We didn't get Scarlett Johansson and we didn't get
yeah,
Letitia Wright for season 1. I know that. And I don't
yeah.
think we got Gwyneth Paltrow. I think what's her name? Lake Bell has just been doing a lot of the white female voices for the show.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's like most of the old cast isn't still on board with this stuff. Like, well, they're not under
Yeah,
contract anymore. It makes total
exactly.
sense. But it does kind of suck because but I mean these voice actors are doing a great job. Like I believe that was Black Widow. I believe that was
Yeah,
you know,
Odin.
I can get on board with Tony Stark even. Like they
Yeah,
portray him um like Robert Downey Jr. portrayed him. So it
exactly.
works.
Oh, and
Plenty of go ahead.
I was gonna say I was just pleasantly surprised that they had Idris Elba back for this
Yeah.
episode.
Yeah, and for such a small like a couple
Like
lines.
3 lines.
Yeah. Like, oh, Hela has fallen from my gaze. Like that it's like pretty
Yeah,
much it.
exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, I thought it was a great episode. Another surprise for me. Like I said, even watching it, I was surprised by the end. Like from the beginning to the end, I was like, okay, this was actually pretty cool. It started out in a way that did not, um, knock my socks off, but when it got into the story, it was pretty damn cool.
Yes, it was.
Well, I have to get going.
I know you do.
We've kept this episode it's a
Short and
little over
sweet.
20. Yeah, a little over 20 minutes, and I think we covered it pretty well,
I
honestly.
think so too.
Yeah, I think we both really enjoyed it. And I don't know where I would rank it if I was ranking it. Maybe we'll do that in like a round table. But yeah. So I can't wait for next week. I think next week is the 1600 something. Like, what if the Avengers assembled in the
Tomorrow?
1600s?
You mean
I think
tomorrow?
so. Did I say next
Yes.
week? I keep saying
I
that.
know.
I keep
Yes.
saying last week and next week. I'm like, no, that was just yesterday. That's
Yeah,
tomorrow.
no. I'm excited for that one. I'm interested in seeing what they do with it. So
Yeah, only 2 more to go, so pretty pumped. Hopefully we do a round table and I'll be able to talk to you again for that.
Yep.
Until then, though, enjoy your time off and
yeah. Safe travels.
talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.